Hello, and welcome to SETI Live. I'm your host, Beth Johnson, Communication Specialist here at the SETI Institute. Welcome to our viewers from around the world. Thank you for joining us. Please let us know where you are watching from. Welcome also to the listeners on the podcast version of SETI Live, available on most podcast platforms. Thank you for listening. Now, the OSIRIS-REx mission, one of my personal favorites, launched back in 2016, took a sample of asteroid Bennu in 2020 and brought that sample back to Earth in 2023. And that's when the fun began, trying to get the sample out, get it analyzed, and finally papers are coming out telling us what's going on. Today, I am excited to be joined by senior sample scientist Danny Glavin from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center to talk about just one paper from all of these results that have been published recently. So it's really exciting. Danny, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Beth. Yeah, it really is an exciting time. I've, spent 20 years of my career getting ready for this moment, really.
I understand that. We've had Dante Loretta on many times, and especially talking about his book and the mission and all of that. And that's his life's work. So obviously, pretty much your life's work for the sounds of it too, and that is incredible. So let's start this off. Is there life on Bennu?
I wish we had found life, but just to be clear, we did not. We found the chemical building blocks, the basic ingredients for life, in a very interesting environment inside the asteroid that could have produced these organic compounds. But we did not detect life itself. That would have been, we would have been Nobel Prize territory, I think, if we had found extraterrestrial life. But it's actually a good thing that we didn't, believe it or not, because NASA promised that this would not be a restricted Earth return mission, that there was no risk of finding life because this is a dead asteroid. Mm-hmm. And indeed, that's basically what we found.
That's all right. Well, let's talk about that some more. But first, Danny, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your role on the OSIRIS-REx mission? What does a sample scientist do?
Yeah, so I have really the honor and privilege to lead a group of about 60 scientists who are focused on studying the organic composition, the organic matter in this material. So I lead it's a working group called the Sample Organics Analysis Working Group, or SOAG is what we call it. And it's just been a real thrill. I mean, not one person can do everything. And so you really need a team of scientists working together in a coordinated way to study these samples.
I love the teamwork aspect of it. I got involved in OSIRIS-REx as a citizen scientist when I was still I was a little bit in grad school, a little bit not, but I was helping map out where the tag SAM was going to happen. And the tag SAM is the part of the mission that actually collected the sample. And of course, that was a wild aspect because Bennu is an interesting asteroid. So why was Bennu selected? Let's remind everybody as to the selection process.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2010. So 15 years ago. And, there are, I think, a couple million asteroids now that have been identified. The number keeps going up and up because we keep getting better at especially detecting the smaller ones. But most of them are in the asteroid belt. But to design a mission like OSIRIS-REx, where you go out and you bring a sample back, you need a near-Earth asteroid, and there are only a much smaller amount of near-Earth asteroids, the ones that cross the Earth's orbit, and then we needed a smaller asteroid, 200-meter diameter or larger, because the really small ones spin too fast, and that makes it too dangerous. So that brought the number down to, 150. I can't remember exactly. And then out of those, there were only 5 that were carbon rich, so organic rich. And so we targeted one of those, and that was Asteroid Bennu. So a near-Earth object that has an Earth-crossing orbit, large enough so it's not spinning too fast, and carbon rich.
So the carbon rich was one of those main pieces of the selection, and that sort of brings us to, there are different types of asteroids in the asteroid belt that you could have selected. So what about Bennu ended up being kind of surprising about this carbon-rich ball of not tightly packed rock.
Yeah, so as you said, there are different types of asteroid. There's a mission called Psyche right now going to visit an iron-rich asteroid. Maybe it was the core of an ancient planet. Bennu is really special because we're learning now that it was part of a lost salty world from the outer solar system. I mean, currently it has an orbit that crosses Earth, so it's on the inner solar system, but it's a fragment of a much larger parent body, we think, something that's like 100 kilometers in diameter and had fluids and salty fluids like hydrothermal systems inside. So a really kind of dynamic place. And this would have been 4.5 billion years ago. And then this parent body somehow was flung in to the inner solar system. We're still trying to work out how that happened. Right. And why it ended up where it was. But really, the body that we sampled, this, 0.5 kilometer diameter carbon-rich pieces, is really a fragment of a much larger body. And so I think that was kind of the biggest surprise. We detected some of these minerals that are only formed by liquid water, salty brines, some that have never been found before in a meteorite. And then, of course, the organics, which we'll talk about here shortly. But yeah, a lot of surprises. We're not just learning about, the current Bennu, but the history of Bennu and where it came from, and which ties into the origin of solar system and maybe even potentially the origin of life itself.
We will definitely talk about that. I'm going to welcome people in from where they are watching because we are getting some responses. Let's see. So welcome in from South Jersey, Sweden, France, Maryland, Georgia, the state, Massachusetts, Nova Scotia, welcome in Blue Noser, Sweden, and someone is just watching, it looks like from Saturn. I don't know. So, okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Once again, I am speaking with senior sample scientist Danny Glavin about some really amazing results from this Bennu sample. Okay, so let's start with what you found. You found amino acids. Tell us about them. What are they and why are they interesting? Why is this an important discovery?
Yeah, so amino acids are the fundamental building blocks of proteins. So all life on Earth, we need proteins and enzymes. These basically help fuel all the reactions, speed up all the chemical reactions in life. And so there are 20 protein amino acids found in life. And it's kind of a big mystery why those 20 were selected. We can talk about that a little later. But one of the special things about the Bennu samples, in contrast to meteorites, which we've been studying, is that the meteorites get contaminated. As soon as they enter the Earth's atmosphere and hit the Earth, they're contaminated by all the organics and biology on Earth. And so when you study them, you have to be very careful about trying to identify the contaminants from the components that formed in space. Well, with Bennu, we don't have to worry about that. We now have this very clean and pristine sample where we can trust the results because it hasn't been, exposed to the biosphere. And so in Bennu, we found 14, not all 20, but the majority of protein amino acids that are found in life were found in the Bennu samples. And again, many of these amino acids had been detected before in meteorites, but we weren't real confident that what we were looking at was extraterrestrial. With Bennu, we know all of these amino acids are extraterrestrial and were formed in that parent body very early on in the solar system. Pretty exciting.
That is really exciting. So you touched on it. Let's get into it a little bit. There's 20 amino acids that we call the building blocks for life. How does that work? Why these 20, and how do they work together to be the building blocks?
Yeah. So again, this is really an open question in the origin of life. Why the specific 20? One of the things that we've been learning from meteorites and the Bennu samples themselves is that there are actually many amino acids in these extraterrestrial materials that aren't found in life, non-protein amino acids. In fact, in some meteorites, we find hundreds of amino acids. Many of them don't even occur naturally on the Earth. So if you assume that this material from asteroids and comets was being delivered to the early Earth, there should have been a soup of hundreds of amino acids available, right, for life to choose from. So we don't know why the specific set of 20 were selected. We've now found 14 of them of the protein amino acids in Bennu. What about the missing 6? So that's another interesting question. Why not all 20? Perhaps those came later in the original life. So maybe you started out with a smaller set like 10 or 14, and then through evolution, life eventually evolved to incorporate all 20. Why 20? Why that's a magic number? I really do not have the answer to that. I wish I knew. But I think what we're learning is that at least a large fraction of this material, the components of life, could have been delivered from space.
So what does this mean for the history of our solar system? What is this telling us? What, these amino acids being at Bennu, why is this a big deal?
Yeah, I think the reason this is a big deal is because Bennu is, it's an ancient fossil of the early solar system. I mean, these materials are older than the Earth itself. And so what we're 4.5 billion, plus years old. And the chemistry that happened inside that large parent body, Bennu's parent body, was churning out these building blocks of life. It's these asteroids were like giant organic chemical factories. And this was happening even before the Earth formed, right? And so for me, that's just fascinating. The building blocks of life were formed very early on in our solar system, and then were delivered everywhere, not only to the Earth, but to other planets like Mars and other moons. These building blocks were widespread. So I think, the big picture kind of takeaway is, the building blocks of life were pervasive, widespread. And, we're trying to answer this big question about where did life come from here? Are we alone? I think the Bennu findings and what we're learning about these building blocks formed in space and that they're widespread really suggests that the chances of life elsewhere I think that it's increasing now. The building blocks were available and, sent to the right environment, perhaps life could have started elsewhere. So time will tell.
So it's clear that our audience is very interested and excited about this research as well. As you can see from our banner, if you have questions for Danny, please feel free to put those in the comments. We are tagging them as they come in. And there are a few, so I will be getting to as many of those as I can. So Danny, what is this? How does this help us with life? So you've talked about how this, kind of leads into the possibility, under the right conditions, these could have, could create life, be the basis for life. Obviously not conditions at Bennu. We want to, again, establish you didn't find life at Bennu. So what does this mean for life in the solar system? Are we talking that it could be far more widespread? How did these amino acids get there?
Yeah. And so this has been one of the kind of interesting things about the Bennu samples so I talked about the amino acids, but that's not the only building block we found. We also found all 5 nucleobases in our genetic code in DNA and RNA. So the genetic components are in there as well. And we had the right environment. We had these salty, kind of evaporative, briny environments of the type similar to sort of drying lake beds on Earth, Darwin's warm little pond. We had this right environment in the Bennu parent body. And what it's looking like is maybe we just didn't have the time. So we think that this water activity, right? You need water for life, and the organics were forming maybe over a period of a few million years. And maybe there just wasn't enough time, right, for the chemistry of life to happen, the spark. The Bennu parent body was disrupted, and that organic chemistry essentially stopped. But again, if you get these building blocks to the right environment, like the early Earth, potentially Mars, we think Mars, had oceans and a thicker atmosphere 4 billion years ago. You get these chemicals to those environments where you had the time to, take the chemical steps needed for the original life, then maybe, we're talking, about a higher possibility there. But yeah, absolutely. I just think there wasn't enough time to do the chemistry to go from the basic building blocks to take all of those steps you need to get something like a protein or, a nucleic acid.
So that actually leads to, that actually answered, I think, Zapfan's question about if there were any DNA bases in the sample. So you said, yes, all of them.
Yeah, and an RNA. So there's 5: adenine, cytosine, thymine, guanine, and uracil. I hope I got that right. ACT. And these are, so they, in DNA, they form these base pairs, right? Which form kind of the rungs of the ladder in the twisted DNA molecule. And yeah, all 5 are there in the Bennu sample. And so that's really cool. We also see phosphate. So we have magnesium phosphate minerals that could provided part of the phosphorus. There's a sugar phosphate backbone, right, of the DNA in addition. So those components are there as well. But again, we're not seeing, a nucleic acid. We're not seeing, a large protein. We're just seeing the components of those large complex polymers. So, it's still a mystery how those formed and came together. They obviously did once. We have one example, life on Earth. But the big question is, could this chemistry have happened elsewhere in the solar system?
The ingredients for the soup are there, but the soup is not there.
Exactly. We have all the ingredients for the cake or the soup, but we just, we have to figure out the recipe, I guess.
All right. Well, we've got a few other questions. A couple of people are asking, and one comes from Holger and one comes from John Ray. Have these same amino acids been discovered on Mars? Are we looking forward to the sample return mission? Maybe, whatever. For that, are there more amino acids on asteroids than we found on Mars so far? Where are we in comparison? As you said, Mars had water at some point. What does that mean in the grand scheme of life there?
Yeah. So Mars is I think Mars is maybe our next best bet for maybe not current life, but ancient life, 4 billion years ago. And we've got rovers, actually 2 of them right now, the Curiosity and Perseverance, that are exploring 2 different kind of crater lake environments, which should have been ideal for life, and, encountering sedimentary rocks, mudstones, the types of rocks that can really preserve these ancient chemical fossils. We've found some tantalizing hints. So we have organic compounds, but simple ones, nothing really complex yet. We haven't detected an amino acid yet with either of the rovers. That being said, we do have some data from Martian meteorites. So there are rocks that, through an impact get ejected and sent to delivered to Earth. There's one that I studied, an Antarctic Martian meteorite called RBT 04262. So it was discovered in 2004, and we actually find hints of a few amino acids that are not protein amino acids, so they're not contaminants that we think formed on Mars. We can't say whether they're biological or not. Right. Non-biological chemistry can explain their presence, but I do think they're amino acids on Mars. Just the current rovers, the instrument technology is not sensitive enough to detect them because they're present at low levels, which is why we absolutely need Mars sample return. We need to get those cores that are being collected by the Perseverance rover and Jezero back to Earth. And NASA and ESA have plans to do this. And then we can, it opens up the whole world of instrument technology to really search for, the traces of ancient life in those materials. So I can't wait for that day. The current plan is 10 years from now. If everything goes perfectly, 10 years from now, we should have those Mars rock cores back on Earth.
That would be amazing and something to definitely look forward to. I'm going to welcome in a few more people from watching from Kansas, New Hampshire, the UK, Louisiana. There were more. Hungary, Germany, and El Salvador. So bienvenido, welcome in. Thank you everybody for watching. Okay, so there's a few more questions here, and we've got some good questions. I'm really happy about them. So Felipe is asking, and I think you touched on this, but I want to reiterate it. Are these amino acids that formed on the asteroid, or do we think they came from space and were somehow deposited there? What was the origin of them?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. We can't rule out the possibility that some of the amino acids that we're seeing formed on icy interstellar grains during the formation of the Earth. So when the solar system formed, you had ices and dust swirling around, and then the planets formed, and eventually the Bennu parent body came together, and it could have incorporated ices, interstellar ices, where you had amino acids. I think most of what we're seeing, most of the chemistry, because the amino acids are actually quite complex, what we're seeing in Bennu, was through these reactions, this hydrothermal activity and these salty brines. And that was all chemistry that happened inside the parent body. So the ices and rocks that were there were melted, probably by radioactive heating, by the decay of aluminum-26, for example, that provided the heat, to melt the ice and then really do this more complex organic chemistry. So I think most of the amino acids we're seeing in Bennu were sort of native or formed inside the asteroid parent body, but we can't rule out that some of the chemical precursors and possibly amino acids themselves formed, or carried in by interstellar dust grains. That's a great question.
There's one that's kind of to follow up with. Thomas asks this one. How do we know that the amino acids were not delivered from decayed microbes or spores driven from Earth's upper atmosphere by magnetospheric plasmoids or other solar wind physics? That is a great question. Thank you so much. So how do we know that these didn't come from us?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a fantastic question, and it gets into a property of amino acids that I've been studying, for most of my career, called chirality. And amino acids they come in basically two forms, left-handed and right-handed. Mm-hmm. And they're non-superimposable mirror images. So I don't know if you can see me on their screen, but see how my thumbs stick out. Well, amino acids have that same property. So chirality is also called handedness. Now, all life on Earth, including the ones in the microbes and spores, basically only have the left-handed amino acid. The proteins don't use the right-handed form. Now, in Bennu, we see equal mixtures of the left and right-handed forms. And again, this is a clear indication of non-biological chemistry, because when you make amino acids in the lab, you always produce equal mixtures of the left and right-handed form. So yeah, non-biological chemistry. And again, no contamination, because if there had been contamination from a microbe or a spore, we should have seen more of the left-handed form, right? And we didn't see that. So yeah, it's a great question. So no contamination by microbes or spores in this material. This is really fresh, pristine material from the early solar system.
That is excellent news. Oh, okay. I'm happy to see that chirality actually has an application. I've heard of it. I knew of it. I'm glad to see that there's a use for that in looking for astrobiology.
Yeah.
So last question from the audience here. What percentage of organics were in the samples? The headlines always said they're high in organics. So what do we mean by high in organics? What sort of percentages are we talking about?
Yeah, so total organic carbon, it's actually fairly high. It's something like 4 weight percent, maybe 4.5 weight percent of organic carbon. If you talk about specific molecules, though, it's much smaller. It's part per million level of amino acids, for example. So it's I wouldn't consider it trace levels, but they're pretty low concentrations. But the total amount, if you sum up all of the organic material, it's actually quite high. 4.5% organic carbon is actually more than we find in most meteorites, even the most carbon-rich meteorites. So Bennu, this material is really very special. Not only is it clean, right, from terrestrial material, but it really has high concentrations of organic carbon, which is pretty cool.
Wow. Okay. So it is substantial on a microscopic scale. It sounds like. So
yeah.
It's one of those you wouldn't look at it and go, look, creatures. But
yeah, I mean it's not as enriched in organics as your backyard soil. But right. For a 4.5 billion-year-old space rock, where it's pretty good. This is some really exciting chemistry that happened in the Bennu parent body. There's no question about it.
That's awesome. Thomas had a follow-up question, and I did not know this one, so I was going to ask it anyway. I have read that chirality decays over time. Is this true?
Yes, absolutely true. So if you have a bacteria, and it dies, there's a process called racemization, where over time the left-handed form will actually convert into the right-handed form. It's called racemization. And just to give you an example, fossil shells that we've studied in the ocean, kind of at room temperature water, after about 1 million years, the left-handed amino acids racemize until you get equal mixtures of the left and right-handed form. So that's a great question.
I'm learning so much more about biology than I ever have before on a very, very small scale. That's really neat. So, Danny, what's next for you? What's next for your part of the mission? OSIRIS-REx is no longer OSIRIS-REx. It is OSIRIS-APEX. It is off to Apophis. It will not be taking a sample, but that is a whole new mission with new team members. What are you doing? What are you working? Are you still working on a sample? Can you show the sample model that you have?
Thanks for asking. So this is this is 120 grams. So this is an actual Bennu sample. I wish it was. This is a clay simulant that we've colored black to look like the dark Bennu material. But this is about what was returned, 120 grams, 4 ounces. And by the way, this was about twice the requirement. So the requirement was 60 and we returned double. And this may not seem like much, but this is a bounty of material. I mean, our team is only studying, I don't know, maybe 15, 20%. And the 70% of this is being stored, archived, and will be available for generations of scientists. I don't know, maybe my great grandchildren one day will be looking at this stuff in a lab using an instrument that doesn't even exist today. That's pretty exciting. It really is a gift that keeps on giving. Right now, I think we're still analyzing sample, but we're getting at the point where we need to write up our results. We're finding many more exciting things that I can't talk about yet until not life. I haven't found life, but we're finding other chemicals that are very, very interesting. And so we're writing up that work right now. And so I'm helping review some of the papers, and we'll get it published. And hopefully within the next year or so, you're going to see a lot more science results coming out of the analyses of these samples. So that's what I'm focused on right now. We're sort of done with the lab work, and it's time to write up the data and get it published.
That's always where I got stuck.
Not easy.
No. The writing part is the hard part. Never ask a graduate student, how's your thesis or your dissertation going. So Danny, thank you so much for being here today. I am really excited for the results of this. Like I said, this has been a long time in the making for you, for Dante, for a lot of other team members. And we've been covering it for a while. So I'm very excited to see these first results come out. And I'm looking forward, as you mentioned, to all of the new papers that will be coming out, hopefully in the next year. And maybe we'll be seeing you back here again with some of those results.
That'd be great. Yeah, this is just, I feel like this is a science. I really do feel like this has been a science fiction movie, and I'm an actor in it. It's just, it doesn't feel real, but it is. I mean, the building blocks of life, right, in space. It's just incredible, and we're going to learn so much more. Again, these samples will be around for generations, and I just, after I retire, I'm going to enjoy sort of just watching the results that come out and the new discoveries, and just be proud that I was part of this mission.
That's fantastic. Congratulations again. Thank you again for being here. Thank you everybody for tuning in, for watching, for asking some great questions. We will be back next week. Frank will be hosting, and we're going to be looking at an exoplanet that we think we can use as a laboratory for the habitable zone, because it goes in and out of it. So we might be able to sort of observe that and see what changes happen. Once again, we are the SETI Institutes. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we do these programs based on your funding and your support. So if you have a couple extra dollars, please go to SETI.org, click the Donate Now button, and help us out and make sure that we keep this show running for the foreseeable future, so we can keep having amazing scientists like Danny back on. And we will be back next week. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. And thank you again, Danny, for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you.